Hi guys, welcome to the Mindful Loving Project podcast, where you will hear the stories of everyday people that have turned their pain into peace, power, and purpose. Get ready to expand your mind, find peace within your struggles, and learn new tools to face life more boldly. We are all in this together. So before we get into this awesome talk, I want to share with you guys my 8-week one-on-one coaching program called Empowered Living. This program is for single women who are ready to end the painful cycle of toxic relationships, are ready to release the negative emotions, beliefs, and traumas that are holding them back from evolving into the confident and empowered version of themselves, is ready to build a strong foundation of self-love to support her unconditionally, is ready to identify and begin attracting the relationship she dreams of, and is finally ready to live a life she loves. I want you to know that you are so deserving of all of this and more. You no longer have to wish to be the person you desire to be. You have the power to be her right now. But you need the tools and the guidance to create such a transformative shift, which is why I created this program. I have been in the trenches, not seeing the light or the possibility of something different for my life, and it took me almost losing my life for me to finally choose me. I want you to know that you were meant for more. You are meant to be the best version of yourself and have someone by your side who only brings out the best in you. But only you can take that step and do the work necessary to have the life you desire. And lucky for you, I got you covered. To sign up or learn more about Empowered Living, visit the link in the show notes. All right, so hi guys. So today on the podcast we have Amanda White, who is a maternal narcissistic abuse recovery coach and creator of the 8-week online one-on-one recovery program called the Scapegoat Daughter's Guide. So thank you so much, Amanda, for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
I know. So today, we're going to have you share a little bit about your background and how you've turned your painful experience into peace, power, and purpose.
Okay. So you want me to just start?
Yeah, just start from wherever you'd like.
Okay. So I would say, in short, I grew up in a very chaotic, unpredictable, emotionally volatile, emotionally negligent household.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like that for as long as I can remember. And I didn't realize how much it had shaped me in terms of how I saw conflict, how I saw women, how I saw men, how I saw my body.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was so affected, but I was in the first, I guess I should be more specific. In the first 10 years of my life, it was just my mom, one of my older brothers, and my twin, and me, obviously. And so I didn't know my dad in the beginning parts of my life, which is why with my program, I talk mostly about my mom because she had the biggest impact, but my dad was very toxic too. But he came in the second decade of my life from I would say 10 to 18. He was in my life, and that's where a lot of my memories are of just a lot of fighting, a lot of yelling, a lot of control, a lot of gaslighting, a lot of dismissiveness. Just a lot of pain,
Yeah.
And I didn't realize until I had gotten older and I was dating very unavailable men and had really avoidant, critical, and judgmental women as friends. The way I spoke about my body, that I never felt good enough for any opportunities. I was always doubting myself.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost I had this internal life of oh my God, this is too much, borderline suicidal. And then I had this external life of one persona at home where I was constantly stressed out, always the problem solver, never knowing what to expect, what was going to happen to this professional life, my friend life, where nobody knew what was going on. I was a magician at keeping things a secret because with this type of abuse, you're kind of conditioned to think loyalty is you don't say anything. You kind of keep it under wraps. And I would say my dad was more obviously toxic, but I think a lot of that had to do with the conditioning and the word choice that my mom had kind of displayed throughout my life. I would say my mom was more of the covert narcissist of you just didn't know unless you lived with her. So that was very confusing, but I didn't really understand what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, like I was saying, I had like this other persona of like everything together, and I always like had these amazing internships, and I went to this amazing school, and I had an amazing car, and my hair was always done, my nails were always done, until I got to a point where like a very specific event kind of just like blew up my entire life. And that was like 2013. And that was like the beginning of like my, oh my God, I need to get my shit together.
Mm-hmm.
But even at that point, I didn't truly realize that it wasn't all my fault. You know, I had carried this belief that like everything's my fault. How people treat me is my fault.
Mm-hmm.
Like why I can't sustain this is not my fault. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy enough. All of this like deep subconscious like limiting beliefs that were like essentially running my life. I was not aware enough, but I was becoming aware.
And did you hear those messages from like your parents, and is that why you internalized them? Like what, and if so, like what kind of messages did you get from them that made you feel as if you weren't enough? And
That's such a good question, because in truth, I don't think in my memory, if I'm being completely honest, I don't feel like I was ever told you're not good enough. I think it was like, especially at a young age, like my emotions like were not acknowledged. They were like, I felt very inconvenient.
I see what you're saying.
Like, and so, and then I like later on, as I was like a teenager and thinking about going to school, or like whenever I had a thought or idea of like something bigger, like my mom would respond and be like, well, I don't know, you don't think this, or you may not be responsible enough for this, or you don't know how hard that's going to be, kind of like instilling fear.
Gotcha. So not like directly, but pretty much the messaging behind that was like, are you really even capable?
Yes, exactly. And so I kind of like carried that, and then all of these situations, because that was like my belief, right? All of my external reality was like justification of those beliefs. You know, and I just wasn't aware enough. I think I was too stressed out and like so focused on productivity, where I didn't have a second, or I think I was so afraid to feel it, because I was like, if I feel it, I'm going to collapse, and like, who's going to be there for me kind of thing. Where I was like, it just took me so long to be like, oh my God.
Yeah.
You know, this isn't all of my fault. It's like, there's a lot of things under the surface, and there's a lot of things that I was told not to talk about that have conditioned me into being this person. And go ahead.
And I was going to say, wow, you like totally caught that. That's like, oh my God, I do the same thing. And it's probably just because we've like been conditioned to like, you know, like be prepared. Yeah. Be prepared.
Oh, that's a great point. So
like
true. Yeah.
Anticipation. But I know I was going to say, oh gosh, now I completely forgot what I was going to say. Wow, I lost my train of thought. Okay, sorry, go on.
No, it's okay.
I'm going to try to remember.
I feel like I could talk forever, but it wasn't until like, I would say like the end of 2017 did the word like narcissism come in my life. I never, like I think for so long I thought my dad was the only toxic one, even though I feel like I intuitively knew like my mom was an issue for me. I think I felt so like physically, emotionally, mentally, financially responsible for her that like it was difficult for me to like put a label on it, if that makes sense. I kind of felt it was like my conscious mind like knew, I was like, oh my God, like I need to get out, I need to be independent, I need to do my own thing. But I think like I just deeply felt responsible for her, and I didn't, and this sounds like self-centered, but like I didn't think she could move on without me. So I think I was kind of like, I don't know how to explain it, kind of like keeping my feet in the sand as long as I could to like hold off that reality until like it hit me like right in the face. The universe was like, Amanda, you need to wake up.
Yeah. And that's so interesting. So when you discovered what, you know, a toxic person is like, what, like, if for those people that don't really know what that means, can you kind of define for us what like a toxic parent is like some characteristics of that?
That's so good. Such a good question. I think for me, if I were to like list it off, I think it's like a complete lack of empathy. Like there's really no space for your emotions. There's no space for your feelings. And in my experience, like whenever I had feelings, I was either like dismissed or I was like questioned, like that's not what happened. Your perspective is wrong. You're inaccurate, which is like obviously like gaslighting, like kind of like confusing me. And then I would doubt my perspective and I would doubt my opinion, which affected me later on in life when it came to making my own decisions.
Yeah.
Big time. And I think those are like the big ones, at least for me, like coming, like just thinking right now, I feel like it's just like the lack of empathy, the lack of emotional space, the lack of curiosity, the ability to make them like, I think for me, it was like also, it's not that even if someone were to question it, like I never expected perfection, but there was never a commitment to repair. Like there was never like, even if like my mom were to say like I made a mistake, like there was never a commitment to like change behavior. It was just like I said I was sorry, get over it. Like there was no acknowledgement of like my process. Like her feelings and her comfort level were more important than my process of like building trust. Which trust, I guess, is a huge component because I feel like I just lost that at such a young age.
Right. And would you say that like, I mean, yeah, that's definitely one of the biggest characteristics is the lack of empathy. But would you say that, I mean, did your mom not show any type of love? Like, did you not feel that? Because I just wonder, like in my case too, where I've talked to you a little bit about like my own experience with my mom, where like she definitely has these characteristics, but at the same time, she also has like a loving side to her. So it's like, is that narcissistic behavior or is it not? Or is it like borderline, So just curious to know like what your mom's experience or how she showed love, if she did.
So interesting because this like it just reminds me of the love languages. And like once I became aware of those, I was like, well, no fucking wonder. Like she was very good at physical needs, but like she was not affectionate whatsoever.
Gotcha.
She was, and obviously like this isn't like a shit show. Like there was obviously she has her own trauma and her own emotional stuff where like in order to function, she kind of like shut that part off. And I think she believed she was only valuable if she provided all of these things, not taking into account like I should probably sit with them and ask them questions and be curious about their experience. So for her, it was like, I mean, we were never affectionate. Like I can't remember like there was no like I love you, there was no hugs, there was no like sitting together, there's no like I think it was just mainly like when I think of her, it's like acts of service. Like she would always like do my laundry, which I appreciated, right? Because that's such a nice thing. But then like if I was upset about something, then it would be like emotional terrorism, like I just couldn't have feelings. Like, and that was such a huge part of who I was, is like a very emotional person. I have a lot of like passion behind how I feel. And I need to be able to express that in order to like feel good about stuff. And she just completely denied that and kind of like categorized me as like this very intense, cold-hearted, like mean person, which I think I became mean because all of this aggression kind of built up and all of this like resentment of not being able to express it, that once I finally did, it was like I would blow up, right?
Wow.
But for her, I don't want to say like she was incapable of being loving. I think she was just incapable of like understanding that other people receive love in a different way.
Yeah.
And it was like her inability to see that. And I think it's more of like a humility thing and being able to be like, wow, okay, I understand. Like, how can I meet you halfway? Like, there was no like real effort in like wanting to rebuild that and wanting to like be a part of something other than what she knew for sure. I think that was like her comfort zone, and anything that threatened that, it was like fighting. Like her fight or flight was just activated. So no, I never felt like, wow, my mom like really loves me. She's really supportive. Like, I mean, I think that's cool that like your mom showed that. I wouldn't say I'm like this expert on narcissism. I'm just like an expert at like my own experience being the scapegoat daughter. But like it wasn't like, there was no verbal affirmations. There was no quality time. Like gifts were like not really. It was more of like, because I have food on the table, like you shouldn't ask for anything else.
Oh, gotcha.
Kind of mentality, because that was like where she saw her value, I think.
And so when you kind of discovered this about, what narcissism is, so this was in college, you were saying?
No, this was like, I had just gotten out of like this really big relationship that reminded me a lot of my upbringing, like towards the end. And I was like, I got like super, like, I feel like it was meant to be that way, because I got like super knocked back to like my childhood wounds.
Really?
Yeah. I have a whole story on that, but
that's
anyway,
really interesting. So like really short, like was that experience, because I think that's so important, because that's what we tend to do is like reenact our childhood experiences with like our lovers. So was that like so you said it reminded you of childhood, and that kind of opened up some wounds for you or made it more like noticeable?
That's such a good question, because to be honest, like I totally agree with like recreating realities, right? And I did that a lot when I was younger, but this relationship in particular was like very, very different, because it was the first person I was ever really honest with from the jump.
Gotcha.
And I think for the first time in my life, I felt like what being loved felt like.
Oh, wow.
So it was really amazing. So I'm in no way like talking shit about it, but I think it happened in a way where I was able to feel so loved, and I was able to like soften my heart and have more fun and be more flexible. That it was just the way he battled his own demons reminded me a lot of how my dad battled his demons, and how he kind of like projected that frustration onto everybody, and would like, I just got to a point where it was like the silent treatment and like blaming me. And I just like, it was kind of like whiplash, right? Because I had this like great relationship with this guy. I was like just growing so much as a person, like feeling light and loved and like independent. And like we had such great communication, and there was just so much goodness that I just never had. First of all, I've never seen it. Second of all, I've never felt it. So it was really, it was kind of like the first time for both of us. And I think just towards the end, like it kind of like I was starting to hold him accountable to certain things, and he was like going through a lot of his own personal stuff, and I was trying to be supportive, and it got to a point where it was like it was my fault for everything. And so I started to get triggered, and I think it was meant to happen that way. It was a very terrible ending. I would never like wish it upon anybody, but I think it had to happen that way in order for me to learn what I needed to, in terms of like there was no one else in my life who could affect me like that. Right? If that makes sense. So I think it was like loving him and then losing him. In order to properly heal from it, I had to go back to what I felt before, and like, and it was so excruciating. And I just signed up for like this therapy with my insurance that
I was going to say, did you do therapy? Like, how did you open up those wounds?
Such a good question again. So I signed up for therapy like through my insurance, which is like one of the other reasons why I even started my business, because the therapy was great for like information, but there was like, it was so funny because it was like I still attracted this woman who was like very aggressive.
Interesting.
But I know, right? It was so interesting. She was so good with the information, but she was very impatient with my process. And we just met like a few times, but she kind of was like, okay, but like, that like he needs to go through his own stuff. So like, you need to like basically move on and get over it. And I needed like, it was just, for me, I needed someone to be like, let's talk about this. Let's break this down. Like, let's understand the root cause so then we can heal from the inside out. Like it was like almost someone, and I was triggered again, like, especially from a woman, it's like kind of like pushing me. Right. Because what she was available to feel was like not at the capacity that I would have loved her to. And it's not anything personal, but I was like, I can either stay in this and people please her, just like I did with my mom, or I can step out of this and like do whatever I can on my own. And that was a huge decision for me, because I was like, can I trust myself on my own? I'm afraid. Like, I'm like heartbroken for one. And then she was like, she brought up the term narcissism to me because she asked me about my past, and I was like, what? Just what I think I thought of it before, and then I just like researched it when I got home, and I was like, oh my God, like I literally was mind blown. I was like, which I'm sure so many women who have gone through this, you're like, it's almost like validating in a sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Like when you can say, you're like, oh my God, so this makes sense. Like, I'm not crazy. I didn't make this up.
Yeah.
You know, which is like another side effect of like nobody really believing you. Because it can be like so crazy where you're just like, especially when you're like, if your mom can be like super charming and good socially.
Right.
I think, and then you're confused because you're like, but wait, you're this person and you're super this, but then at home you're this way. And then reading those like kind of like bullet points, it was really shocking for me. And then I was like searching through Facebook groups, and there was like groups of like 20,000 women who were like,
I know,
which was like fucking mind boggling to me. I was like, oh my God. Like I even told my twin, because she's really like been there from the jump. But I was like, it's not us. Like, it's not only us. It was like exciting, which is odd, but almost like just wild. Like, is this really a thing?
Wow. And did that help you find compassion for your mom finally? Or were you still kind of like in the process of, I don't know if I'm upset with her or if I'm, like what were you, what was going through your mind?
You asked such good questions.
Thanks.
It's so nice. I will say for a majority of I would say like when I was younger, like 10 and below, I like worship my mom, right? Because she was the only one around. But I was always performing for her, right? Because she wasn't readily like loving. It was like I had to earn it, right? Which is another side effect, right? I mean, there's so many, right?
Yeah, that's a great one.
When I was a teenager and my dad came back, it was literally like, this is such a short, like weird story, but we were at like a theme park and this guy was like walking towards me and I panicked as like a 10-year-old because it's like stranger danger, right?
Yeah.
And my mom was like, no, it's okay. That's your dad.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
It was great. Like, and of course, like as a 10-year-old, this guy hasn't been in my life. I've maybe talked to him like 1 or 2 times.
Wow.
Right. And my mom like never talked about it. Right. Never mentioned it. Never like talked us through it, asked us how we felt. But she also never brought any other men around, which I think is like one thing that I'm proud of her for not doing. Because I feel like that causes a lot of confusion. Yeah. But anyway, so then that happened. And I was like, obviously, like, I didn't feel comfortable expressing myself, but I was so weirded out and confused because I didn't know this person, right? But then it's like, it's your dad, right? Which most people are like, that's a great thing. But within like a week, he had already like moved into our place.
So were they getting back together?
I have no idea. I don't even think she knew that he was in town from my like own like memory. And I could be totally wrong about that. Which again, if she did, I feel, and again, I don't have my own children, but in my personal opinion, I feel like you would say to your children, are you open, or this is going to happen. Yeah. We'll take our time with this because obviously like we have our own process too, like our mom is like, for me, my mom was my everything. So then when he came, everything changed and he moved in really quickly and kind of like assumed this authoritative role.
Oh God.
And I know. And it was really suffocating and really confusing because this image that I had in my head of this woman who was like, she was a boss and she worked for American Express and she was this and she was this and she was this, like this whole perfect image that I had of her, it was destroyed essentially.
Oh, wow. So did he kind of take authority over her too? Like, did she submit all of a sudden or like?
It was so strange. It was like, she just became like, I think she became who she always wanted to be in terms of like a housewife, and I think she so badly wanted what she wanted without understanding like things just don't happen like that. Like things, like take time. And especially like she didn't acknowledge like her own pain with my dad, like their whole history and like why he wasn't around for the first 10 years. I can imagine she had her own stuff. So it kind of just like happened really quickly. And then she like quit her job and we moved to a new house. And like, she was like always like cooking and cleaning all the time. And like, it was just a whole new persona. Right. And I saw this version of her and I don't know if I was just like so, I mean, she was my entire world even then. Like, even as children, it was always like, if mom's in a bad mood, everything's,
Yeah.
you know, the day's over. Or like, we don't want to upset
Right.
her. We need to make sure we eat our food. Like, let's not upset her. So I was already conditioned before he came to, like, she was my entire world. And whatever she wanted, we did. Right? Like, I never picked out my school supplies or my own clothes. Like, she did everything. Right? She was very, like, diligent about, like, structure and, like, obsessed with that stuff. And so, I mean, as a teenager, when he came back, I was just like witnessing her, and I was like, you know, it felt so fake to me. And she was like, you need to hang out with him, you need to do this, you need to go there with him and there with him. And like, basically, like, as an adult now, I can see she's like, fill the void, you know, be perfect enough so he doesn't leave again.
Oh,
essentially.
wow.
And kind of like, and so, yeah, that was like the start of it. And like, I remember getting my period, and I was like devastated because I didn't understand it because we never talked about it. And I asked her to like keep it private, and she had told him. And it was a stranger to me, right? Like, it wasn't because I chose that. That was just the reality of it. And I remember that specific day, if I think about trust, and I was just so sad. I was like, even though she wasn't who I thought she was as a child at that time, at that age, like, for her to disrupt that image of like, my mom loves me, she has my back, she works really hard, and to like betray my trust, it was like devastating to me. And I think, to go back to your question about compassion, I think for so long I was so angry at her. And then when my dad left, my sister and I had, like, we applied to schools in California because we actually grew up in Wisconsin. So we moved to California, and then my mom came, of course. And like, that was a total fucking shit show. And it wasn't until, and I had all of this anger and resentment towards her, right? But I was always like her mother, right? She would come to me about work stuff or about friend stuff, barely friend stuff, because she didn't really have any, especially after my dad came and we were just so isolated. I think to just hide what was actually going on. And even stuff with my brother, he battled like drug and alcohol abuse, like really badly. And I was always like researching what he should do and like where we should take him and like what to say to him. Like, she had put so much responsibility on me. And without that, like, and then I remember when I started to become aware of it, and I was like more open to like, this is really stressing me out, I would like a change here, you know. And then she was like, you're crazy, that's not the truth, you're ungrateful. And so I think that was like such a bulk of like my resentment, because without that acknowledgement, it's like, it's really painful. It's so healing for someone to be like, I totally understand your perspective, you know, how can I help you with this, or what can we change here, which is like proper repair that I learned later on in relationships. But I think the compassion came, I would say, after I learned about narcissism, for sure, because at that point it was like really, really, really rough with her. I think I just decided one day, and I just remember I remember the specific day, I just was like, I'm not going to react anymore. I'm not going to jump into this cycle. I'm not going to, whatever she's upset about, whatever I did 3 weeks ago that she's going to bring up, I'm just not going to react, right? And it was almost like that small decision. I don't remember if someone inspired me or if I was just so exhausted. And I think I was starting to understand like the power of non-reaction, to like, the more I react is like the more fuel I'm giving her.
Right.
You know, and if I'm going to protect myself, like, I had to like create that kind of like space between like reaction and response, because a lot of the times what we were arguing about was like, that wasn't really what we were arguing about, right? It was not like the bigger issue of like, she was feeling fear, I think, because she knew that like the dependency that she had developed with my siblings and I was like coming to an end. And I think she just wanted to fight to like get us back into that cycle again. I don't think it's a conscious thing. I think it's just a fear of abandonment. I think it's me disrupting that. And then I started, and then we just like, we lived together for a period of time. We just like never spoke. Right. And anytime she even tried to say anything to me, I was like, I'm not interested. I'm not interested. I'm not interested. It was difficult seeing her and not because, oh, that's my mother. I've never really had like that type of connection to her because we've never been that way. Like, we've never hung out. She doesn't really know anything about me, You know, it was always me about her.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I just started seeing her as like a human being having an experience. It was difficult when I was still around her energy because it just like reminded me so much of like all that has happened.
Right. It's hard to forget. Like it's really hard to like separate the person from the abuse or from, you know, like the pain, but that's a whole process in itself.
So true. I mean, you're absolutely right. I think for me, I think I had, and this may be really what happened. I think I knew that if I was ever going to get out of the situation, whether that's like physical or mental, I had to be willing to let go of like feeling sorry for myself. Because it was in like feeling sorry for myself and feeling like the victim that I would like, it was like the people I was around, the job I was in, like the decisions I would make. It was like, it just wasn't supportive of like the future version of me that I wanted to be. And so I knew that if, in order for me to be, how do I say this? Like be okay, which again, it comes back to like what I thought I was capable of. Right. And all of that doubt and like feeling like having all this fear come up, this instilled fear to like keep me dependent and small. I was like, I have to be willing to let go of my old identity. And I mean, I still had a lot of anger, which I addressed like later on with one of the techniques we both know of. But I think I was like, she's a human having an experience. If she could be this way to me, imagine what it's like being her.
Right.
And again, because at first I was like, no, fuck that. Like, she doesn't deserve that, because I was so adamant on like getting justice. Right. And I was like, kind of like, it was my way of punishing her. Like if I could take something away, then I could hurt her. Right. That was probably what the story that was playing out. And I was like, why am I going to do the same thing to her as she does to me? And what does that do for me? You know, if anything, me seeing her as a human having an experience is not tolerance. It's compassion, but I can choose separation even though I'm compassionate.
That's such a good point.
Because I thought if I was compassionate, that meant it was okay. If I was compassionate, that meant that I had to put up with her. And it was terrifying for me because I was like, I think like my higher self. And I mean, after the therapy, I literally bought like 10 books. Yeah. And I was like in the studying, just like trying to figure it out. Right. Which is why I created my program. Because I was like, you really don't know where the fuck to start.
Yeah.
Right. You have no idea. But anyway, I just remember I'm like, there's power for me if I'm willing to let go of that old identity, that hypervigilant, needing to be right, needing justice, like that kind of aggressive personality I had adopted for survival, right?
And how did you let it go? Like that's, I mean, it's because it's one thing to acknowledge what you have to do and figure it out, but then it's like a whole other task to let it go, you know, because and I really do believe it's a process. I was talking to my boyfriend on the way back from a movie we watched yesterday that like triggered me in so many different ways. But we're talking about that, like, how do you know, because you're the same person, you have the memories come up, you know, from time to time, and it's like it feels like it's like a constant process to kind of bring yourself to the present moment and not be, you know, kind of thrown back in the memories or the triggers or whatever it is. And it's just, I don't know, for me personally, I find myself like, all right, Jessica, like, let's come back to the present moment. This is who you are today. You're not that person back then. Like, so how did you like let go? What was that process for you?
Oh my God. I feel so much had come up for me because I totally get what you mean and what you're saying in the letting go. I feel when I started to see my mom as a person, it was not easy, right? Because it wasn't all of the time. It was like working out, like building a muscle whenever I could. And I knew that, I mean, I started to notice that if I reacted, like my bounce back rate was getting so low because I just didn't have it anymore. And I was like, it just felt like, oh, it was just so heavy and dark, right? And I think for me, it was that decision of non-reaction, right? I had to create that space. But most importantly, and I think like the breakup I had with my ex-boyfriend really brought this to the surface for me was her inability to love, see me, nurture me, and hear me had nothing to do with me. Because I feel so much of my suffering and so much of my anger was attached to her behavior must mean something about me.
Right. Wow, that's powerful.
Thank you. And I feel that's where so many of us are stuck in like the suffering and then like that heaviness of like just devastation, because we're like, well, if her mom can love her and if her dad can love her, and like we can witness all of these things, right? That I feel it really means nothing about you. And it sounds cheesy because they're like, I've seen like cards like this, like, oh, it's really about them. But it's true. It's like, it was her experience. And the more space I took from her, which eventually I physically separated from her, which was like, it's amazing. But then it's like, then the feelings really come.
Right. Like the guilt and.
Oh my God. Yeah. And then also because you're not at war anymore. Like you put the armor down and you're like, oh my God, wait, it's crazy to say, but it's almost easier to be in the war, right? Because I know what to predict in the war. I know who to be and I know what to say. And there's almost comfortability with that old persona, because I was so used to her. I was so used to the suffering and the anger and like the viciousness and like being prepared, that it was actually when I separated from her physically, it was almost like I had one hand in that identity, and then I saw my other identity in front of me, and I was like, because what happens when I let go, right? I can't complain anymore. You know?
Yeah.
I have to, like, I can't, and it's not even just complaining about her. It's also complaining about showing up to friendships where it's like, it's always about them, right? There's so many parallels in my life where that showed that same relationship with my mom. I recreated it, right? But so much would have to fall away if I chose this identity of the empowered woman, the decisive woman, you know, the loving, the patient, the flexible, the woman who is willing to like accept her mother for who she is, but that doesn't mean you have to put up with her. Yeah. You know? And I think in addition to like separating her behavior from my worth, which was like really, really hard, I think it's also like I had to stop trying to change her to get her to be who I wanted her to be. You know, because I feel, even though I saw it as like good intention, I mean, I would show her articles and I would like try to have conversations with her. I mean, I bent over backwards so many times trying to get to her because I wanted her to be a version of herself where it was easier for me.
Yeah, that's so interesting you say that. I feel like we're such similar situations, but like, I don't know where my mom falls on the spectrum, but she definitely has like super similar, you know, traits as your mom or behaviors. But yeah, like I remember too, I would spend like thousands of dollars to get her signed up in programs to help her. And she would and she would go. She actually did go, but like, you know,
there's no commitment.
There's no commitment. Sure. Exactly. Right. Exactly. It's so because sad.
It truly is, because you like the bigger picture is like you feel so responsible for her well-being, right? That you'll like go into debt.
Yeah.
To support them like elevating, right? Because it's your fault, right? There's something you do or you're doing or not doing, which is all bullshit. But I feel it's like a lot of the times, even when I would present my mom this information, or I'm like, I wanted so badly for her to get it, right? Like desperately. I was like, you're smart. It's not that you're dumb. It was her inability to like really, how do I say this? Like really see herself consistently and be willing to like break it down and be willing to look in the mirror. And now after me having to do that myself to be the woman I am today and like untangle, like there are people that I hurt, and like even the relationship with my twin, like it wasn't always as great as it is now, you know, like she was like the target for a lot of my frustration, right? Because I didn't have anybody to talk to, or like I had to go through that too and be willing to see like where else is this coming up in my life? Like what else do I need to feel? Like, because even though I was a victim of this, it doesn't mean that I didn't hurt people along the way.
Right.
Even though it was never my intention, it was just, I was literally just trying to survive. But it is my responsibility to like, you know, to take responsibility for my behavior and step out of like it's because of this. It's like, sure, it was because I was criticized and dismissed all of the time. But now as I'm growing and I'm healing and I can understand, it's now my responsibility to address those things. So with that, like, I know how painful it is and I know how uncomfortable it is, but my mom's inability to remain consistent on the healing path that I know was designed for her, like, I had to surrender to that, you know, because I couldn't put my healing on hold. I couldn't put my life on hold anymore. And it took so much of my resources. Like, I'm not even just referring to like the tangible financial stuff. Like, it took so much of my energy and my mental space and like my emotional capacity to care for her. And I think I just had to surrender that by me doing that was enabling her behavior, for one. Second, it was just I was so in her life and not in mine that I had to see it. I was like, it has nothing to do with me, she not seeing our relationship as worth it. She just wants me to be okay enough with where it is to not ask for anything else. I think when she even would read the articles, I think it was just to like alleviate the moment. Like, there was no intention for the bigger stuff, because also for her, like what I said earlier, what happens for her when she chooses to step out of that?
Right.
You know, the negativity falls, the complaining falls, like the comparison, the talking shit, the gossip, like all of that comes undone.
Right. And then who is she? Like, what does she have?
Yes. And which is exactly what happened to me, because as soon as I let all of that shit fall, like my boyfriend, like 3 of my best friends, like my job, like so much of what I thought was my identity, but I had to be willing to like embody that woman that I wanted to be, that I knew was like the woman that I knew I could be. And it took so much of like, I had to surrender. I had to detach whatever I thought like her behavior meant about me.
Yeah.
Because it was never about me. It was never about any of my siblings. It was all about her and what she was willing to feel, right? Which is why she could never hold space for me emotionally, right? So even going through it now, like, of course I have times where I'm irritated, right? If I go through memories or if I'm having an off day. But even now I'm like, I just have come to such great terms of like, I don't need a mother anymore. I think for so long I don't want to say like I don't need a mother, all aggressive, but like, first of all, I've never really had one, right? Emotionally, spiritually, mentally. There was never that support there. So there was nothing I ever really lost, right? And this whole thing, what I lost the most was my like fantasy and like my wishful thinking, right? And my conditioning that somehow I'm responsible for somebody else's process. Right. And I did that with everybody in my life. I took so much responsibility for them. And I crossed like so many emotional boundaries, because that's what I was taught, but also I attracted people who wanted that. Right. So I had my hands in all these dynamics where I was just like, I think also why it took me so long to realize that it really started with my mom, because I was everywhere. Right.
And did you like that feeling? Like, did you kind of have like a secondary gain there where you maybe enjoyed being needed? Like having that, did you find value in that, or was it just mostly annoying?
I think, of course, when I was younger, it was like, I think for 2 things. I think because I had such a fear of abandonment. And I was taught by my mom that like my productivity was the only thing I could offer anybody, right? And productivity, not just like because I can clean the house, but productivity like I can be there, here, do this for you, do that for you. I have the answer for you. I will never come up short for you, right? Because that's who I was to her. And then she only thought her productivity was valuable, not in the same way, obviously, that I did. But I felt even in my friendships and my relationships, if I'm not, and I think we talked about this, I had this deep fear that I didn't realize that if I'm not perfect, they're going to walk away. If I don't have the answer to this, if I'm not there for them, if I can't deliver on this, they're not going to be there anymore.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think I found safety, and I didn't even have my own self-agency where I was like, but wait, do I even like this person? Do I enjoy them? Am I excited about it? Like, I didn't even have like my own checklist of like, you know, kind of like interviewing other people. I just kind of like took what I could get, and I just over delivered and overcompensated because that's where I felt needed and purpose. Right. And then also it was like, I crafted it in a way where nobody ever asked me about me. because it was
Oh,
always about their drama, right?
wow.
Which is why I'm sure there's people who would like, have any idea what I'm doing now that I knew in the past, they were like, holy shit.
What? Yeah. Oh my God. And that's interesting too, because that's also a way to divert attention to what is actually going on in your household. You
Yes, it was.
know?
Yeah, totally. So in terms of, I mean, there were so many gains that I got out of that. Was I happy doing that? No. But I
Mm.
think being that friend, I liked being that friend, but as I got older, and I think also before I move on, like also what kind of kept me in these relationships where I was like giving, giving, giving was I have my twin, right? I have this person that I go home to every night that like will listen to me, support me, where I kind of like didn't have any expectations for anybody else then. Right? Like I wasn't entirely alone, if that makes sense. Where like
Yeah.
as I started to get older and realize, okay, this is not just my sister's responsibility to be there for me. If I'm there for all of these people, like it's starting to wear on me where I'm just like, but do you even know like you never even ask me about me. You never check in. There's no follow up. I had to take responsibility because I was like, I conditioned you, right, to be like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I like had to start the conversations. And then I started to realize, especially in the relationship breakup that I referenced, like when that happened, like there was no one to be found.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like another painful thing where I was like, okay, so I know this is happening for me. It fucking sucks, but it's also just so much was showing up for me in terms of like all of these dynamics that I was in.
Wow.
That I thought were like my everything. Like as soon as I needed them to show up for me, it was like they didn't even know how, right?
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was major. So yeah, definitely secondary gain for sure. There was definitely like, I felt valuable, right? Being
Mm-hmm.
needed. I was like, oh yeah, you always come to me and you rely on me. But then there's so much responsibility in that,
Yeah.
right? And I think what helped me the most with that, if I will say, is learning to enjoy my own company. Because so often I wanted to be here, there, and like in your business, helping you solve your problems. Because I didn't want to be alone. Because if I was alone, first of all, I didn't want to come home because I hated being home. Second, if I was alone, I didn't know like how to cope with my own thoughts at that point.
Right.
It's like too debilitating.
Yeah. And that's actually bring up a good point too, because it's like you feeling there's like two ways you can take that too. Like for me, like I had so much responsibility that instead of being like responsible in my friendships I mean, I was a pretty responsible person, but I was also very irresponsible. Until this day, I'm still working on the belief that I don't like responsibility. So I kind of went like the other route where it was like people can't really rely on me and I don't care to be reliable because look at all the shit that I went through and fuck
Interesting.
you. Like
Right, because it's do you, and you can let me know if I'm like hitting a point here, but if someone were to rely on you, what does that mean?
it just means a lot of work and pain, honestly.
Right, which I totally get, which makes sense. Now you've like conditioned yourself to not want that.
Yeah, and that's really tough because so that worked for me in the past, but now that I'm trying to run my own business, it requires responsibility and I'm fighting against not really fighting, but I'm trying to learn how to see it in a different perspective and not as like, oh God, people are going to rely on me and I don't want people to rely on me because they're going to want from me and I don't want to be that person for them, you know?
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, I feel like warm as you're saying this because I feel, do you think it comes down to like self-trust, like you being able to communicate boundaries, you being able to stand firm and like, this is what it is. This is like when you can contact me. This is also what it isn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's that, and it's also like I don't want people to be too needy and like expect very much out of me, but that works against me because then I don't provide or I don't
Totally.
serve.
And you withhold.
And I withhold when really I know I can give more, but it's more of like this trying to protect myself and pushing people away. Yet what I want to do is like invite them in. So it's really, like you said, it's learning to create boundaries where you
Yes.
can be that person for people, but just set some boundaries there. So
true, because in my experience, I have become obsessed with responsibility because
really, I need to
yes.
learn from you.
No, no, I think if there's a happy medium because in my experience, like I had to be responsible because there was so much chaos in my house. If I were to add to it, like game over, right? Like I had to be perfect. I had to be together. I had to have the answer. And that translated, right? I went to the fashion industry, of course, it's all image based. And I was just like that perfect person, that perfect friend, that reliable, trustworthy, always can count on me. And now in business, I definitely have like so much like discipline that I'm really grateful for because it has like, that's one thing that I took from my child. There's like the discipline, the stamina. I'm not obsessed with like instant gratification because I never got it. You know, I was always kind of like, and I think the relationship with my twin too, it was like, she was one person that like, I learned how to like work through things with somebody because like we were always with each other. So I feel like I've learned that like things take time somehow, some way. And that's kind of shaped me in business where now I'm like, I can understand like not everything is going to happen as soon as I want it to. And I have that discipline and that stamina. But with that, it can be really hard for me to step away because I feel like if I'm not doing it, then I'm not doing enough, right? And I think in the beginning of my business, I had a huge problem with boundaries because I felt like I had to be everything for somebody, just like I had before. And so it really challenged me to like get really clear on like the problem I solve, how I solve it, and also be clear on like what this isn't, right? Like this isn't a hotline, it's not a rehab center, which I don't say that in a mean way, but it's just I can't deliver like that, and I don't want to deliver like that. I mean, I can, right? I mean, I don't want to say I can't because I can. It's just now that I won't, and being able to like not feel like implementing a boundary is being mean or aggressive. And I think I had to build that like self-trust and also my self-worth, right? Just because I'm not willing to give you 24/7, you know, give you 24/7 of my time doesn't mean that like you're not going to see the results, right? But I had to believe in my own like capability, my own like worth. And so I totally understand like your perspective too, because that's just how, I mean, that's how you feel, where you have to like, now you have to like work through it and see this as like, I can do this. I can use my words. I can implement boundaries. I can make this however I want to make this. And you'll like learn along the way.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. Yeah, like in this point in my life, it's just so interesting to, there's so much empowerment just knowing that like you can set the terms for your life now. Like it's interesting because so many of us carry these like childhood behaviors and ways of thinking into our adulthood, and we're afraid of certain things because of it. And it's just, okay, whoa, that's not existing anymore. You know, that's
totally 100% because we have these like downloaded blueprints of what we think life is and what to expect from relationships and from conflict. And if some like we just kind of, like you said, like carry that over and then operate from that place that we forget, especially if we're still in other toxic cycles or if we're still engaging in like a dynamic, it could be with your mom, could not be, that challenges you or pushes your position, or you're kind of like still at war. I feel like there's not enough time to really see like, but wait, I'm in control here. I can say yes or no to this without the but because of this, right?
Exactly.
It's just about like my commitment. I know I thought the same thing when I figured out, I was like, wow, I can actually change my mind whenever I want.
Yeah.
I can do whatever the fuck I want to do. Like this is possible. I don't have to go off of somebody's like limited perspective of life anymore. Right. I mean, but it was also scary, right? Because I had to come out of hiding.
Yeah.
And I had to like, because with that comes responsibility too, which is what you said before. I had to be willing to like step into that role where I was like, now I'm responsible for everything. My inaction, my action, my healing.
Right.
The words I use, like how I communicate, I'm then responsible for everything because I'm in control now, right? I can't have like the best of both where like I get to make my own rules, but then I'm not responsible for my stuff.
Right.
You know, it's like a full embodiment of like, I am this woman now. Like I get to determine what I'm a part of. I get to determine what conversations I have, like who gets my time, who doesn't get my time.
Right. And so being this, and you mentioned something before too that I thought was so interesting. Like all of these things that you're saying are so clarifying. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
But, you know, you said that, you know, with your living with your mom that she made you feel so small and dependent, right? Because when you're dependent, you feel small. You don't really see your
Yes.
capabilities or the possibilities within that constraint. But
Yes.
when you become independent, which is what you did, you like, found your independence once you broke free. Now you are where you are now, being the woman that you want to be. And so being in that position, sometimes when you like maybe hear, okay, Amanda, you might not be capable for that, or little voices that still linger and come around here and there from your past, what do you do?
Oh my God, this is so good. You're like the best interviewer ever. I think, okay, and I'm not a religious person at all, but I try to see, like, you're referring to like those darker moments when the inner critic comes up, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm such a loser.
Yeah.
I think, okay, so I will say, before I get into what I was just going to say, I am a huge believer in like movement. Like, I know that if I'm stuck in my head, I probably haven't gone outside, or I probably haven't like moved my body at all.
Interesting.
And I think, this all really comes down to like getting to know yourself, right? Which we don't really know anything about ourselves truly, because we've been so focused on somebody else, right? So in the time that I've spent getting to know myself, like, I didn't even realize before like food like was a thing for me. I think I just like was so conditioned to think like only eat if you need to, and you need to work first. Like, you have to earn food and don't spend money if you don't need to. That now I'm like, well, no wonder I was in such a shit mood all the time. But so A, movement, B, like making sure like, okay, do I need to eat, or what's going on? But I think most importantly, I start to see it as like predictable, right? Especially as I'm like reaching new levels personally and in business. It's like that phrase, like new levels, new doubles. Like,
Yeah.
like I see it as predictable, where now I'm like, okay, there you are. All good. Like, I don't need you to protect me anymore. And then sometimes I'm just like, I feel, and I'm not a religious person, like I said, but I feel like when I'm in a competitive like spirit, I'm like, it's just the devil like trying to get me back on its payroll. Right. And I like try to be like, no, not today. Right. And I literally in my mind just envision it. I'm like, no, for what? Or, and I just, even if I let it play out for like 20 to 30 minutes, which sometimes I do if I just like need to feel, but I really check myself, and I'm like, you have too much going on, like too many things to be grateful for, and not to like interrupt my process. But when it comes to like really shitty things, like you're not good enough, people are laughing at you, nobody's going to want to pay you, and like all of those things, it's like, I just like, it's not true. It can't be true. Right? Because this wasn't given to me by accident. This experience wasn't given to me by accident. I didn't do all of this work by accident.
Right.
Like this was meant for me, and it's like, this is my way of giving back, where I'm just like, okay, I recognize it. You're either trying to keep me safe, or you're trying to keep me dependent in this like low level living where like I'm stagnant and I'm settling and I'm not excited about anything. I'm just like not interested in that anymore.
That's so cool.
Thank you. So, I mean, it definitely does come up. So if there's any misconception on like, you're going to reach the finish line and like, you're going to be free, I think like something like time techniques, which we both know, the NLP technique, I think that helps with the weight of it 100%, which I did for anger, which helped me a lot. But I think it's the negative thoughts are going to come. They just are. Right. So it's like, we can switch our perspective to like, oh, I hate this, I'm giving up, of course, and kind of like let it steal our motivation. Or you can just see it as predictable. Like, of course you're coming. Because now I'm like, and then it's like, okay, I must be really onto something, right? I must be really like hitting my next like big outcome if they're showing up now, kind of like trying, like I used to think like positivity was a joke, because I was like so sad and depressed and angry, where I was like, no, fuck that. Like, you don't get it. You don't get me. But now I'm like, it's not even just positivity. It's like deep positivity of like, no matter what, things are going to work out. It may not look the way I need it to look or wanted to look or thought it was going to look, but I have so much faith now that I'm like, if I can get to where I am now from where I was before, like, holy fuck, right?
Yeah.
Like, especially for someone like you who understands, like, even what I'm saying, like, that is not easy, right? So it's like, if I can do that, like, imagine like what else I can do. And if it's just these limiting beliefs that are keeping me in hiding and like holding me back from reaching that level, like, I can take care of that, and I can start reframing that and just starting to see it as like, this is predictable. Of course it's coming, but it's fine, because it doesn't mean anything, right? They're just thoughts. Like, it like genuinely doesn't mean anything. It's only if
Yeah.
I let it mean something about me, does that like suffering story play out. Like I mentioned before, like somebody's behavior meant something about me. And that's always what I
Right.
thought. Like if I still believe that, then I would let these thoughts kind of like create a home inside of me. Right. But I'm
Right.
like, I don't need that anymore. Like it's just not effective. And I know like whenever I do let that shame spiral like start happening within me, like I'm like the worst person to be around.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm just not excited and I'm angry and I'm irritable. And then that's when the anger from like, I start blaming other people for shit. And it just gets me in a headspace that I'm like, I've been there far, far, far too long. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to go back there.
Yeah.
So.
And that's, oh my God, like your growth is, and you can just hear it from your story and your voice and like the passion behind it. Like you've come a long way and it's amazing.
Oh my God, thank you.
Yeah. And like, I guess one last question is, how do you, in terms of, oh, my dog just woke up, so he might be making some weird sounds. He like threw up in the corner just now. Okay. But anyways, so like in terms of, you know, your mom, because obviously she played a huge role in who you are today, right?
Totally.
How do you separate? I mean, you've created some pretty strong boundaries there and, you know, breaking up with your mom and creating that boundary between you two and that separation. But how do you get away from the guilt for some people that have, you know, feel guilty about creating that boundary? What kind of advice do you have for those people?
Such a good last question, because I just had a consultation call, was it yesterday or the day before? And like, this woman, I had so much empathy for her because she was like, it's like she consciously knew, but the guilt was so paralyzing, which of course it is, right? You're so conditioned to like
Right.
believe that and to think like you're responsible for them. I would say, I mean, in my own experience, I just like, and I don't want to say this in like a general statement, but I just like had to go through it. Like even like the last day that I saw my mom, like at this point, like, I mean, it was like daggers back and forth. Like there was no positive, like it was just dark. It was angry. Like I literally could say like I hated her in that moment. The second she walked out, like I dropped to the floor and started like bawling my eyes out. And it was so confusing for me, right? Because I was like, but I fucking hate this person, right? And look what she's done to me. And like all of those things are real too. But I felt so bad. Where I was like, it was part of me was like, oh my God, is the war really over? Like I was kind of in shock, right? I was like, oh my God, is it over? Like I was by myself and I remember like shaking because I was like so weirded out by like what I was physically going through. I like couldn't intellectualize my pain in that moment, which is what I used to do so often to like alleviate any like thing from being too heavy.
Mm-hmm.
But I just remember like feeling so bad because I was like, what is she going to do? Like,
and was it a conversation that you had with her that you said, I need to separate from you, or?
You mean like prior to this happening?
Yeah.
Oh my God, it was multiple conversations. It was like a year and a half in the making, but it was like, there was always an excuse and it always came down to money. And like, I mean, it was really, really hard to get to that point. And I even like, I mean, I just felt so guilty because I was like, how is she going to do this? And how is she going to do that? And oh my God. And like, and it sounds so crazy when I'm thinking about it now, but of course it was, because everything that I had done in my life was like, was this going to please her? Would she be okay with this? Like I think so many times I had job opportunities that I was like, but if I leave, what's going to happen? And I think she was so dependent on like my energy and my output and just like needing to be around somebody, even though like we never got along, that, I mean, again, like before I go into a super long story, I think my best advice is like, it's real. Like don't try to convince yourself that it's not. And like the anger is not like an antidote, you know, like you can't use the anger to like fight the pain, which is like something that I did because I was like, my anger makes me powerful. Mm-hmm. It's the only way people will listen to me. I can fight through life with my anger, but it definitely falls. Like I just had to be with it and I had to understand. I had worked so much on my mindset before that I was like, it's my turn. Like I deserve this. I have like earned this like more than I can imagine. I was like, I'm not selfish, like I need a break, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, the physical feeling was so debilitating, like the breaking of like codependency and like feeling like without me, what are they doing? And could I have said something? Could I have done something? Am I being mean here? Am I being cold-hearted? So much was happening that I just like had to be with it and had to just be so gentle with myself.
Yeah.
And that she's meant to be on this path too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the more that I interrupt her process, the longer she goes not learning her lessons.
Interesting. And so she has something to learn with what she's going through, right? Okay.
Yes. So I just started seeing it as like, because I was feeling all of her emotions for her, because I was doing all this work for her, and I was basically like mothering her son, like that was like a lot of what our relationship was, that I was like, I started to understand it intellectually, like I'm learning so much for her so she doesn't have to feel anymore, because the whole issue here is she doesn't want to feel, right? That's the whole issue from day one, because of her deep, deep pain. So I did all of the feeling, but then the confusing part was like me being emotional about my own stuff was a problem, right? But I could feel her stuff. My point being, I was like, but I keep learning lessons for her, which is why she's not growing.
Right.
That I was like, the best thing for her is like also to like be away from me. And not because of like I'm this toxic person, not at all, but more so like
stand on her own 2 feet type of thing.
Yes. No matter how difficult it is, no matter how rough it is, no matter like the doubt, the loneliness, or whatever. I don't even know what she's experiencing, but whatever happened in her life, like I have to trust that it's meant for her, and that whatever, you know, if she doesn't want to take care of herself, like she's not going to, you know, and I can't control that. Like the more that I try to control and change somebody, like I said before, it's so exhausting. And it's so ineffective because it doesn't work, right? And there's no sustainable change when you're just changing for other people anyway, or like not doing things because you actually want to. So I just started seeing it as like, okay, this is for her too. Like this is for her too. And you know, like
that's a beautiful way of saying it. Like it's really comforting to kind of tell yourself that this is for the both of us. It's not just for me, but it's also for her.
Yeah, because it came to a point where like it wasn't who I was when I was around her. Like I was mean as fuck, right? Because I like, it was my way of defending myself. I didn't even know how to be another way. And the same for her, you know, like we kind of just like, we've always brought out the worst in each other. And I think it's just because I remind her the most of herself, you know, and I think she had fear in regards to that. So instead of like helping me blossom, she was like, no, stay quiet, be quiet, you know, my whole life, where I feel I was ready to like get bigger. And I was like, okay, I really have to let this go. And like, just start seeing it as like, I have to learn how to take care of me. I have to like build a relationship with myself now. Like I didn't even know, like, could I have a place on my own? Could I figure out the bills? Like, could I like get shit organized? Could I make my own food? Like I had like no foundation, you know, because I was so fixated on somebody else. And then also like living in a home where like I wasn't inspired or motivated to try new things, that I was like, it's just my turn. And not in a selfish way. I was like, she's going to learn what she's going to learn. And I don't wish anything negative on her. I just know that like it was time. Wow. You know, and I was so content. Like, and I think this is major too, is like we totally don't give ourselves enough credit for how much we've tried. Because nobody, especially not a woman, wants that relationship with her mom. You know? Right. I can imagine I can't even, like, I personally can't imagine, but I can also imagine, like, how healing and loving and exciting it is to have a support system like that if my mom were healthy. But I just knew that I was like, it's not going to happen, you know? But it's okay. It's just the way that life is. Like, I can't change it. I can't keep wanting what I want, because it's like I'm abandoning myself, you know? Yeah. I'm abandoning what it is that I want, how it is that I want to feel, and I can't keep compromising. And I needed to give myself the credit that, like, I tried so hard for so long. Like, I can't even tell you, like, the bends and, like, the backflips and the mental fucking gymnastics, like, what I did to try to make it work because I felt like it was up to me. Is crazy, right? And so I just had to come to a point where I was like, I'm so content with the effort that I know I now can't do the work for two people. And it's just, this is what it is, right?
Yeah, that's like the epitome of self-love right there.
Totally. Yeah, totally. And I think that was also kind of like something else I had learned being separate from her, right? Like I had to learn on my own. I had to be only responsible for me. I had to like figure out what do I like? What don't I like? What is healthy? What isn't healthy? You know, I so long thought this was like I was supposed to be doing what I was doing. Right? So it just took so much like mindfulness and gentleness and just remembering like the more I interrupt her process, like the more harm I'm doing to her and to myself.
Damn, that's really good. That's really good, girl.
Thank you.
Well, holy moly. Yeah. I just wanted to, just say that, you're such, I think it's just so inspiring, especially with this topic, when it comes to family and like coming out and doing work around helping people understand their own family dynamics and how it could be abusive and narcissistic, because a lot of people don't want to confront that reality.
Totally.
So the fact that you're basing your work around this and, just acknowledging your pain and finding power out of it, and purpose and peace, all of the three.
All of it. Yeah.
Kudos to you. That's amazing. So really proud of what you're doing. And so how do, if people want to find you, how can they find you?
Yay. Okay. So you can find me, I mean, it's basically all the same on Instagram. It's at Break Up With Your Mother, literally. Okay. And then my website is also breakupwithyourmother.com, which is where you can find like all of my recent blog posts and also more information about my 8-week online program, the Scapegoat Daughters Guide.
Nice.
And then also like obviously on Facebook, my business page is Break Up With Your Mother.
Thank you guys so much for listening to my podcast. I hope that you gained some wisdom from it that you can apply into your own life. If you could please subscribe and leave me a rating or a review, that would mean so much to me. And stay tuned for next time.